Hi everyone, my name is John Bosco. If this is the first time you're visiting my channel, welcome. If you are a returning subscriber, thank you for trusting me and visiting my website. I'm more than happy to have you here. All right. All right, so your previous days I've been trying to walk us through on terms of what Scrum is and what Scrum is not, and Scrum Applied. I've also given some mathematics on how to understand simplifying what Scrum is. Today, we are going to basically take that a higher step. So here, what I try to do at the same time is just to recommend a book or books or resources that can be able to upskill you towards learning and embracing Scrum. So today, I would be able to, we can make a paradigm shift in terms of how to understand Scrum, what to do and what not to do. All right, before we proceed, if you are first time visiting me, please, I would encourage you to hit the subscribe button, like, subscribe, share, refer me to your friends, people who are interested in learning about Scrum. You could always visit www.ineedscrummaster.com, and then I can be able to meet with you. You can book a section, or you can email me at info@ineedscrummaster.com, and then I can be able to have that wonderful conversation. With that said, I will be able to pull up my board and then we can journey together. Let's Scrum together. All right. All right. Let's see what I have here. So today I will continue with the explanation of Scrum, but in terms of a new way of Scrumming, right? Most people do Scrum in different ways, different teams, different way of adopting Scrum. I mean, there is no particular way of doing Scrum. And I will have to re-emphasize this, that Scrum is not a silver bullet. What that means is Scrum do not promise to solve the problem, but Scrum will help you to resolve the problem. So today I'm going to point that direction on how you can begin to look at Scrum from another perspective. In doing that, the first thing I would like to do is to direct your attention to a very valuable resource material written by Jeff Sunderland, who is a co-founder of Scrum. It says, the title of the resource material is The Act of Doing Twice the Work in Half the Time. This is a wonderful book, right? I'm not trying to advertise any product, but the point I'm trying to derive here is if you want to really follow and understand Scrum as Scrum, I would recommend this text. It's so valuable. The reason in part I would recommend you to look for this text is because of the value driven embedded in the text, right? So there are a lot of materials, there are a lot of information that is going to help you to be agile rather than doing agile. I've said that before. There's the difference between being agile and doing agile. All right, so in order to understand Scrum, we need to know what Scrum is and how it works, right? Most people have different understanding. Most people have different definition. Most people have different explanation and analysis about what Scrum is. So, but I'm going to take us back to the primary document that every person should or you know should be able to read, which is the Scrum Guide. This Scrum Guide is like a living document that has really fleshed out what Scrum is, the do's and don'ts, principles and manifesto, values of what Scrum is, on how to use Scrum to deliver value, right? So what does the Scrum Guide say about Scrum? It says, quotes, "It is a lightweight framework that helps people, teams, and organizations generate value through adaptive solutions for complex problems." End quotes. So let's try to analyze it. What does that really mean? We have that long sentence, it could be problematic, right? But what does that mean for a layman? How could you really explain that to to either a 5-year child or even to a senior? Simply put, Scrum is an approach to getting work done, as simple as that. It is an approach. People say, I would agree, it is a framework, an agile framework to getting work done. And most of the time, Scrum is used in resolving complex problems. That is why most of the times you hear Scrum being used in a software environment or in an IT environment. But that's not true. Scrum could be used in any kind of human endeavor, in the military, in education. That is why we have Scrum. If you haven't heard about Scrum, hit me or put a comment in the comment section. I will be able to explain that. That will be another topic of discussion for another section. Scrum could be used in the healthcare. Scrum could be used in aerospace. It could be used in almost every facet of human endeavor. Again, Scrum is an agile framework. There are different types of frameworks. I've tried to explain what agile is. If you don't know what agile is, I recommend that you listen to one of my videos where I explain that in detail. Is an agile framework a lightweight? What I mean by lightweight means that it could be adopted in different ways by different teams, by different companies, right? And Scrum will help you to deliver value in small pieces. It doesn't go in bulks because Scrum will help you to deliver in piece and then look for feedback, go back again, refactor, and then come back again in a better feature. That's what Scrum is. All right, so I tried to also explain that there are different types of agile frameworks. Scrum is one of them. Most of the times people hear about Scrum thinking that Scrum is the only framework we have. No, there are other frameworks perhaps you don't know about. You heard about Lean, you heard about Extreme Programming, SP, talk about Crystal Clear, talk about Kanban, talk about adaptive software development, feature-driven development, rational unified process. These are different types or different agile frameworks, but agile is like the umbrella. What that means by umbrella means agile houses all other frameworks, right? So agile is like the environment where all of the frameworks flourish in. You get my point. So most people see Scrum, but why is Scrum so popular than other frameworks? Perhaps in parts because of the value or because of the extent of the value that Scrum could be used to deliver. I mean, Kanban is another agile framework that is popular. Um, Sometimes you hear people saying things like Scrumban, which is the combination of Scrum and Kanban, or Lean Scrum, or Scrum Lean, or Scrum SP. This shows how people can be able to extrapolate or do a hybrid of both or different frameworks. Okay, so just in case someone asks you what are the other frameworks we have, you can be able to, I believe you can be able to explain that. In order to understand what Scrum is, I mean, it is necessary and pertinent. In fact, it is sine qua non for you to understand what Scrum is not, right? One of the easy way to get to the right answer is to get to the wrong answer. If you can be able to decipher the wrong answer, then you can be able to find the right answer. So in order to explain what Scrum is, I think it is very, very pertinent to understand what Scrum is not. There are some misinterpretations, misapplications of Scrum, and that will help us to understand what is not Scrum. Scrum is not an acronym in any way. Sometimes when I talk with people who don't really understand what Scrum is, they're like, is that an acronym? No, no way. It's not an acronym. I've done a video about the history of Scrum derived from two components. One is from sports of rugby. So if you don't know about rugby game, please go and watch the video where I gave that history of Scrum using the rugby game. This other perspective was from the literal sense, in terms of the literature aspect of based on the publication that two Japanese software developers gave in Harvard Business Review of 1986. So that gives us the explanation that Scrum is not an acronym. Scrum is not a project management methodology. It is not in any way a project management methodology. I was once discussing with a friend and I said, I'm a Scrum Master. And he says, oh, isn't that a project management methodology? I was like, nope, that is not a project management methodology. There are two types of project management methodology. One is agile, the other one is waterfall, right? So in no way is Scrum a project management methodology. Rather, Scrum is an agile framework. Scrum is not a silver bullet. It's not a cookbook for project delivery in any way. Scrum is not an agile methodology, but rather it is a framework. Methodology is different from a framework, right? I'm going to make a video about the distinction between methodology and framework. But for now, Scrum is not an agile methodology. Scrum is not only for software development. Most people like, oh, I guess Scrum is only for IT people. That's not in any way just for software. Scrum is used for both in education sector, in healthcare, in military, in aerospace, even in planning birthdays. People use Scrum to plan birthdays, any kind of event, making transition from one government to the other. Scrum is almost used in every facet of human endeavor. So it's not just for software development. Scrum is not for every project. Scrum might not be used for every project. If you are familiar with the sign film methodology or approach, you'll realize that there are times Scrum might not be used in resolving a problem. There are times, but most of the time, Scrum is used for complex problem. Projects that are very simple, you wouldn't use Scrum because that is not complex in nature, right? So it will be very much adherent to use waterfall. Scrum is not for every organization. So I hear some people say every organization can use Scrum. It depends. So would you argue with me, or would you agree or disagree that in any organization that wouldn't like to make a transition in terms of embracing change, would you say that Scrum will be used for them, will be used by them? Absolutely not. Scrum is not contained in the Scrum Guide. What I mean by that is that Scrum Guide lays the foundation, but all of the information that is required, especially evolving information, is not contained in the Scrum Guide. The Scrum Guide provides us with that foundation, lays the foundation. There are things that are not, provided in the Scrum Guide, which is always updated. So I'm hoping that based on the day of this publication, that in future that Jeff Sunderland and Ken Schwaber and all other co-founders of Scrum can be able to update based on the feedback, based on the evolving information, or based on the period of time that people are using Scrum. All right, so how can you get started using the Scrum framework, right? So what are the basic things you need to have? How do you make a transition from waterfall to agile using Scrum? I've made a video about the mathematics of Scrum, right? There are basically one simple rule to getting started with Scrum. And that one simple rule is the 3-5-3 rule. Very simple. So I would hope that you can memorize the simple rule of 3-5-3. What does that mean? You need to have the 3 Scrum responsibilities or accountabilities. That is the first 3. The second, or the 5 is the 5 Scrum ceremonies or events. And the third 3 is the 3 Scrum artifacts. Very simple, straightforward, right? For companies trying to make a transition from waterfall to Scrum, from waterfall to agile using Scrum, you need to memorize this 3-5-3 rule. 3 Scrum roles: product owner, Scrum master, the developers. 5 Scrum events, right? I'm going to explain that in the next board or next slide that I'm going to show you. And then the other is the 3 Scrum artifacts. Very simple. I hope you memorize that. How does Scrum work? Very simple to know how Scrum works. There are people, there are work, there are tools, activities that should be in place in order for a Scrum to be able to flourish. Now, number 1 is the people. You need to have the right people in place. And the people goes back again to the Scrum rule I just mentioned a few seconds ago. You need to have a product owner, you need to have a Scrum master, and then the developers, right? Previously, we used to say the development team, but because of the updates, they call developers. And these developers could mean software developers, could be QAs, quality assurance, could be BAs, business analysts, could be solution architects, it could be testers. I mean, these are people that makes up the developers, right? There are things that should be in place in order to implement, or in order to say, okay, we are being agile using Scrum. The Scrum artifacts, right? You need to have the product backlog. The product backlog is a container that houses all of the user stories, of the epics, all of the themes, all of the features that should be included in the developments, right? So the product backlog contains the product backlog items. We need to have the sprint backlog. The sprint backlog is the container, another container ready or that has been refined for the developers to develop, for the developers to start, doing the coding. And the third artifact is the increments, which is the potentially shippable products, right? Now you need to have the activities in place. And those activities are the 5 Scrum ceremonies. For example, the daily stand-up, also called the dailies, sprint planning, sprint review, also called the sprint demo, and the sprint retrospective. And then the other one, which is not a ceremony, but is an activity, is a practice, is they call the backlog refinement. So having these 3 things in place, people, things, and activities, will be able to help in order to say, okay, now we are making a transition. Now we can see Scrum is working for us. All right. So if you take a look at this image right before, I tried to use this image to really explain how does Scrum work, right? This is simply Scrum apply. I'm going to just explain this in a jiffy because I'm going to make another video explaining this in detail. How does Scrum work? First of all, we need to get the stories. We need to get the, what we are really going to work on from the stakeholders, which is like the first image you have on there on the top left. And then there is a particular person who is in charge of in managing, in coordinating, in piloting, in helping to explain what those features are, what those stories are, what those end user stories are to the other team members, which is the PO. The PO is like the voice of the client. He or she is the person who interprets, explains, analyzes what is to be built and why we are building that, right? That is the primary responsibility of the PO. Now, the PO puts all of these end user stories in a container, which is called the product backlog, right? Now, those product backlog, the items in the product backlog, PBIs, are not refined. They are not prioritized, right? Until it goes through a practice called backlog refinement, then it's kind of be refined. And during the sprint planning, those items are being estimated and then they are moved from the product backlog to the sprint backlog, right? Now, the items in the sprint backlog are ready for the developers to start the sprints. But for us to have the sprint backlog, the team need to have a meeting called a sprint planning. The sprint planning is an opportunity for the developers or the Scrum team as a whole to be able to discuss about what they're going to work on, in what order, and how. The how is left for the developers to decide. Every day after the sprint planning, the developers will meet for 15 minutes in order to be able to inspect and adapt, right? Keep each other accountable of what they have committed themselves for. And these sprints, understand sprint as a duration period. This sprint could be between 1 week to 4 weeks, right? So within 24 hours after sprint planning, the developers will have a meeting called the daily stand-up. 15 minutes time box, right? And there's a practice which I already mentioned, product backlog refinements. That is an opportunity for the development team to be able to discuss with the PO to understand in what order they're going to refine and then prioritize the items in the product backlog. At the end of this sprint, it could be 1 week sprint, it could be 2 week sprint, it could be 3 week sprint, it could be 4 week sprint. The developers will be able to have another meeting called the sprint review, right? It is an opportunity for them to demo of what they have worked on, right? And then they can be able to capture feedback from both internal stakeholders and external stakeholders. And after that, they have another meeting, final meeting called the sprint retrospective. The sprint retrospective is an opportunity for them to reflect not on the product again, but on the process, on the team and the process, right? So this is a simple formula on how Scrum works. I hope that makes sense to you. All right, so that's where I am going to stop that explanation for today. I do know I would, you might have some questions concerning. just give me those questions in the comment section, and then I can be able to respond as soon as I can. If you're looking for a place to do your Scrum training, I need ScrumMaster.com provides you that for 6 weeks training, very detailed. What that means is your opportunity to do a theory part, practical side, and have the real life experience, which is called the hands-on experience, where I can be able to explain all of this in more detail, and then you can get your certification, and then you can start doing your Scrum, start engaging in job search or job hunting per se, right? So if you have any question, please shoot me an email at info@ineedscrummaster.com. If you want to have a one-on-one section, you can also shoot an email and we can schedule to meet. If you are, you need more explanation on each of what I've just explained, you could also put that in the comment section and I will reach out to you. All right. If this is the first time, like I said, of you visiting me, thank you so much for visiting my website, perhaps by chance or by providence, whichever one it is. You're welcome. Click the subscribe button, like, share, recommend, tell your friends about I Need Scrum Master, and then I'll be more than happy to always provide you with new content every week and every now and then. All right. Thank you again, and then I will see you again next time. Bye for now.